Try that again. Whoops. Get out of that. Lost my screen share. Hi, everybody. Bear with me to get my screen share up and running. There we are. Hello, folks, and welcome to our demonstration today. My name is Lisa Hill. I work here at Infobase, and today we have a panel for you on the topic of I'd hire them if they would just apply, attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. This is one of our webinars of a year-long series that we've been doing with Adam Smith. And before I hand this off to Adam, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. GoToWebinar is a little bit tricky in how you communicate with us. So we'd love it if you would ask questions and send your comments directly in our little question box. To do that, I would love it if you guys would take a look at your GoToWebinar control panel. Look for either an orange question mark or the word questions, or it might even say questions/chat, depending on what browser you're using. You can just type in, where you're calling from, the name of your state, the name of your school, the name of your city. Doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that you know where that question box is if you do want to add your thoughts or questions to the conversation. So just go ahead and look for that orange question mark in your GoToWebinar control panel, or the word questions chats, and just put in the name of the state, city, or school that you are calling from, just to prove that out. There we are. Excellent. Welcome, Illinois. Welcome, Florida. Welcome, New York. I myself am sitting just a little bit north of Boston. Thrilled to have you here. Greetings from Miami, more Florida, Mississippi State. Excellent. So that's where you're going to put in your questions, your thoughts, your feedback as we go through the demonstration. I'll be manning the chat just in case you have any technical questions. And everyone that is here today will receive a follow-up email from us probably next week that will include a full recording of today's demonstration. So thank you all for joining us. Again, we're looking at a webinar entitled I'd hire them if they just apply, attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. This is sponsored by Firsthand, and this is a career building platform that engages job seekers, students, professionals, a career intelligence platform. And now I'm going to hand this off to you, Adam. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you all so much for being here. We will continue to make space for people to pop in. Know that many of y'all are on college campuses. School may be starting soon. Where I work, I don't know, school starts on the 22nd. Other areas it's already started. So just want to acknowledge that folks have to come in and out in a really crazy transitional time. Also wanted to quickly read this land acknowledgement and kind of set the place and space, knowing that this is a community. This is a community that's connected virtually, which is amazing. But this is another opportunity to acknowledge not only the land that we're on, but also the struggles that we all are facing every single day. So if y'all would bear with me. We acknowledge the land on which we sit and occupy today as the traditional ancestral home of indigenous peoples and nations. I acknowledge my roots on the stolen lands of the Dakota and the Ojibwe in Minnesota, and my current residence on the land of the Shawnee and Osage peoples in Kentucky. If you can take a moment, use the question box again, and type the name of the peoples whose land you currently reside on in that question box. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering and to this dialogue. We take this opportunity to thank and honor the original caretakers of this land and the current caretakers of this land. We also honor our ancestors and the narratives of people and their knowledge who have empowered us to be here in community today. Thank you all so much for doing that. We appreciate it. My name is Adam Smith. Do a lot of higher education work, I was telling someone the other day, I've never been in a job anyone had before me. Two of the folks today are my students. The programs that they were a part of, we started with nothing. I mean, it was really no job description. So my current work is really centers around student success, retention work at the University of Kentucky. It's been my work in my ministry for about 25 years. Do a lot of consulting work with InfoBase and with programs, doing student success audits, diversity audits, program audits, especially in TRIO programs, and do a lot of coaching and speaking all around the country. There's my contact info if y'all are interested. I'll let our illustrious panel introduce themselves.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm Leanne Burnham. I am an assistant professor, actually just beginning at Morehouse School of Medicine. I come from, before that, City of Hope in Duarte, California. I'm a translational scientist. And so what that means is, in addition to being a scientist at the bench, where I have a lab that does research on prostate cancer and Black men specifically, I also head up community programs where we have free cancer screenings, and I was doing that in the greater LA area for the last 4 years. And then also I partner with clinicians to help design what are called race stratified clinical trials. So what that means in a nutshell is, we know that underrepresented people who tend to be at higher risk at times for certain diseases don't necessarily have access to what are the newest cutting edge VIP treatments. And so we take a scientific approach to see if there are genetic reasons or ancestry reasons why a drug may work better in certain populations. And then we designed those drugs to, those clinical trials for patients to be able to have access to those medications. I'm a health disparities advocate for sure. Like I said before, I research prostate cancer. And in terms of being an advocate for underrepresented minorities in STEM, I was able to start that a decade ago under Adam Smith when I was a student at University of Akron. Sort of got my feet wet in mentoring, and I've done that across the board. So a lot of times people come to me or maybe are referred to me to sort of help non-traditional students navigate their way through any sort of a STEM degree. And there's my contact information. Hit me up on LinkedIn later on if you're interested in anything I say today.
Thank you, Leanne. Appreciate you. Natasha?
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha. I'm a risk management analyst for a construction company. I've been dedicating, I don't have a specific professional role in research, but I've been dedicating myself to understanding the intricacies between the things that happened historically to Black people, during the Industrial Revolution, and how those things are impacting us still to this day. So right now I sit on the St. Paul Capital Budget Advisory Board, one of the only women of color representing, making sure that our city receives the type of funds that we need for the things that will help empower people from my background. And I hope to be a future CFO. I'm a first generation college graduate, and I'm also a single mother.
Thank you, Natasha. Natasha was an accountant, so that I'm going to gas up her firm a little bit. A little construction firm that built US Bank Stadium in the Twin Cities, and also built Alliance Field. I think it's called Alliance Field, where Minnesota United hockey, or not Minnesota United hockey, soccer plays. So a pretty big time construction firm in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Dr. Bates.
Greetings and afternoon, everyone. I guess Natasha knows where the money resides, so that's good to know as far as that is concerned as a future CFO. Dr. Tierney Bates, I currently serve as the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the University of South Carolina Upstate. Go Spartans. Really, I look at myself as being a transformational and servant leader. The reason I do this work is I've always lived my life in service, so I think it's important to understand that. A lot of what we will talk about today, we have to look at it from a generational lens. I call it Generation Now, or Gen Z, so millennials are 40 years and older now, so let's stop talking about millennials and really talk about what the workforce looks like for the next generation. And then I've been over career development in multiple different institutions of higher learning. So I always have my foot on the ground on what's going on from a workforce perspective as well. I own the Bates Group. The Bates Group is a national boutique consulting firm where we focus on DEI speaking, consultancy, workshops, finding search for your talent that you need for your specific, whether it's corporate, higher education, nonprofit realm as well. And then I'm also executive career coach as well within that realm. And hopefully one day, through the Lord's blessing, maybe a future college president, but I'm gonna claim it now.
Well, thank y'all so much for your time and for being here. Y'all who are watching, you all know we're going to have questions, we're going to have conversation, but it's more important if you all are in the chat and you're asking us questions and you're engaging. So we have things prepared, but feel free, please continue to put questions in the chat. Dr. Bates, Tierney, I wanted to start with you. One of the things that we've heard, kind of the theme of this whole conversation, it's all about I'd hire them. And the them could be all these different people if they just apply. But then at the same time, we also often hear, well, this person just wasn't a fit, or I didn't like this person. How can organizations, whether it be a for-profit company or a college or university or a library or any place, how can we deal with some of those biases when we say, look, we'd hire them if they'd apply, but then when people come and interview, we treat it like it's The Voice and we have a chair to spin and we're looking for fit and we're looking for like and we're looking for performance. How can we unpack some of these biases? Because I know what often happens is the people we like are the people like us.
Sure, Adam. So first of all, I'm gonna just give myself a plug. I just wrote a chapter about this with my good friends from the University of Minnesota, talking about what this career looked like from an equity lens for the future. So it's called Mapping the Future of Career Education as a Whole. So grab that book, read that chapter. It's chapter number 4. I also wrote an article with NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, around fit. Fit is from a lens, particularly from a homogenous lens, that doesn't include people of color, LGBTQ+, all the other great stuff when it comes to a workforce environment. So a lot of times when we're going through hiring practices, we're talking about fit, but honestly, that fit is from a homogenous lens. For example, how our people show up in the hiring practice, we don't think about that. Who's on the actual committees when we're hiring staff, particularly staff of color moving forward. And a lot of times fit blocks people from actually moving forward in the process, but they could be the best talent that you needed. We want everybody to fit inside this box when we're going through this hiring process, when we look at fit. But fit was never designed for us. I can give you a whole talk on this because I wrote, like I said, a whole article on it. It was never designed for people of color in the space when we talk about spaces we work in, particularly with me working in higher education as a whole, that was traditionally white male, and how we move forward and navigate that, right? So when we talk about fit, I tell people throw that word fit out, because fit will automatically block you from getting the talent, particularly the talent of color that you need in your space moving forward. And so if you always are going like, well, I don't know if they're a right fit, what does that mean? Define fit within your organization, right? Because another thing we have to understand, I just mentioned, Generation Z is coming along, they're not going to fit what we traditionally have been taught when a corporate entity, nonprofit, or even higher education as far as that's concerned. They're coming with more tech savvy, more skill sets than ever before. They're not traditional, meaning they don't want to sit in an office or a cubicle from 9 to 5. The workforce has changed. 1 out of every 6 jobs now is remote. Prior to the pandemic, it was 1 out of 67. So it's important to understand is what is fit defined in your organization, and then throw it out. Because if you focus so much on fit, you will miss out on the talented workforce, particularly of color, as you move forward.
That's so good. I think one of that continues to be the struggle, right? We say, you know, Leanne, Natasha, Tierney, we've known each other for a while, and I've always happened to have those people apply to work for me. It seems interesting. I wonder if they apply only to work for me. So one of the questions, Leanne, that you and I have talked about is how people recruit, right? You've just went through a process, not only a process of going to work on your PhD and your MD work from Ohio, going all the way to LA and Loma Linda, and then working at City of Hope, and then the whole process of now moving across the country and going to Atlanta with a family and all those things. Talk about how recruiting is one of the ways, right? Getting different to apply. It's also what you put out in the atmosphere. Are you a safe place? Are you a place where we can not just survive that, but thrive in that environment? How are the kind of things that organizations and companies need to do to basically land those fish to even apply in the first place?
Yeah, so you need to make sure that you hire caring people at every stage. That's the one thing. It's not necessarily the higher ups who are initiating this conversation for the hiring process, but you're talking to people in admin, you're talking to recruiters at booths at different conferences, that sort of thing, and you can just feel when people are genuine, and that comes from the tone that the institution sets with who they have there. And so if that's the mission of the institution, and they've already sort of hired that way in the past, then that's going to trickle down to sort of who they're bringing in next. You feel early on, like if you're trying to push to get into a place and it's not necessarily welcome. I've been in those places and they end up not starting off welcoming and don't necessarily end up welcoming either. But you can, when it starts off that way, you tend to have a better chance. And so I think for me, even when I hire in my lab, of course you have skill sets that you're looking for. Of course, that's important. But for me, it's just the vibe I get too. How personable is this person? How much of a team player do I think this person will be? How welcoming do I think this person will be towards people that are going to come after them? So it's not, I think a lot of times when people are recruiting, they're just looking at the CV or the resume and they're just looking at the skill set. And there's just so much more to take into account that either equals that skill set, and a lot of times it even surpasses it, because you can teach some skills. The other things you can't, certain personality things you can't teach. So if you can pick up on that, it almost surpasses the skill sets a lot of time.
I think at an earlier point in my career, when I was a younger professional, everything, I was a Clifton Strengthsaholic. Tierney, you remember when you was a Clifton Strengthsaholic? Okay, everybody put their strengths on their door. And I'm hiring, we have this, and we need these, and we need these. And one of the things that I learned, and through a lot of coaching and unpacking and therapy and trauma with me, is that it isn't just about strengths. It's that acronym SHAPE, right? Strengths, heart, attitude, personality, experiences. In the end, I don't care what your strengths are if you don't have the right heart. I don't care what your strengths are if your attitude sucks. I don't care what your strengths are if your personality is one that won't accept change and won't want to innovate. And I don't care what your strengths are if you don't bring a diverse set of experiences, right, to the table. In the end, the strengths are really important, but what are the things that we can teach and train? What are the things that are the core things, right? The attitudes, the heart, the experiences, the personality that we need, right? And we have to then be comfortable understanding when that different comes, we have to create a culture that lets difference not just survive it, but thrive in it, right? Where you're allowed, because Tierney touched on this with Gen Z, right? Gen Z, and even now our post-war students that we saw in the fall 21 and fall 22, they're saying every day, I'm not working like my parents did. I'm not sacrificing. My life isn't my job. They saw us do this. And so they're saying, I'm going to work places that care for me as a person, that care for my health, that see me, that value me, right? Otherwise, I'm not going to work there. And I'll go work at Panera Bread if I have to. That's what's happening. And there was an old adage, Tierney, you and I have been in higher ed for a long time, that Black and brown people won't go here because there's not enough clubs. And come on now. We just coming home watching Netflix like everybody else. We're going to Fargo if we can be safe and we can be rewarded for our hard work. We can care about our well-being. We don't care. There are Black and brown people all over the planet. The question is, the word gets out pretty quickly. This is the organization. Because the difference with people of color, LGBTQ community, if Tierney says to me to apply for a job, he knows I'm going to apply because he knows what I'm looking for and he knows I'm safe there. More importantly, my family is safe there. So we have this network all the time where we're going to say, okay, who are the brothers and sisters that say this is an okay place to work? And it has nothing to do with where you can get your hair done, or if there's a barbershop, or there's a church, because we've been doing that in the basement and outside the back door since 1619. Natasha, really interesting. Tierney, quickly, because I know we have a question in the chat about your book. Can you again share the title of the book or throw it in the comments or chat and the
I'll throw it in the
chapter?
comments, but it's called
Okay.
Mapping the Future of Career Education. So it just
Awesome.
came out last month. So.
Look at Dr. Bates. Our brother moves now. He's in it. So make sure to check that out. Natasha, talk a little bit about, because I know when you were a student at Metropolitan State University, you're a student leader, you're a mom whose daughter goes to an immersion school, who's learning a whole different language that you're trying to learn in remote work, and you were working full-time at the same company you ended up working for, right? What attracted you? What made you stay? Because in the Twin Cities, now you have a degree, you're doing accounting work, you have all this ability. You could have went anywhere. It's one of the best places to live on the planet. So you had all the options. What made you choose to stay with your current firm?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. Honestly, before I answer it, the job that I had while I was going to Metropolitan State University was actually different. I was a senior accountant, and honestly, I've been able to apply and be hired at a lot of amazing companies. Some of them I didn't even put on my LinkedIn, because once I got there, the experience that I had as a woman of color and being that first person hired made me want to figure out how to get out of there. I think I'm a part of that Gen Z we talked about. So, but yeah, Mortenson attracted me because when that George Floyd situation happened, a lot of rioting occurred, a lot of damage happened to the Black community, honestly. And so I joined an organization called the Twin Cities Rebuilding Coalition. And I wanted to participate in helping rebuild everything that was destroyed during that time. And when I was there, certain people from a lot of different organizations sat on that board. And one of the people was, I think his name is Cavante Johnson. He was an African-American guy who went to the U of M, who worked as a construction manager for Mortenson. And he contributed a great deal to helping people understand, because most businesses and people who came to the meeting were reaching out to figure out how to protect their property. You know, how do I maintain my business? How do I board up this place? And he offered insight on the psychological aspect of boarding up a whole community. How does that impact the residents that didn't contribute to the destruction? He helped them understand, like, well, once we put these boards up, they might mess up your foundation. So he brought something to the table to show that this company cares, and he was like a brand ambassador for the company. And so once I graduated and I realized, like, and I've been to other companies, I shouldn't name the other ones that I hurried up and ran away from, but if they're here in the meeting, they see my face. But anyway, he made me excited to want to work for a company that allowed him company time. He was attending this type of meeting. Right now, that my company knows that I'm here talking to you. So that's how they attracted me and helped me to stay. Now, one thing that they also do is they dedicate every month, they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion seminar type of thing for about an hour. And they actually bring somebody from the diverse groups, representing a group, to help us understand, or to help other allies or people who want to be allies understand what that means. So they go the extra mile to make sure that their company, everybody who works there, is prepared to accept people like me who are just different.
Natasha, I think one of the things that people come to webinars and they say, well, but I need nuts and bolts. Tell me what I need to do to get people to apply. The truth is, especially in communities of color, historically minoritized communities, it's deeper than that. It's allowing the people, it's one of the reasons I work where I work. We have a whole bunch of Black men that work in student success at my institution, but we are allowed to not only be Black, but to be men. And to not just show up and sit on somebody's shelf and say, well, we have these Black men who work here. To do things that aren't necessarily in our major job responsibilities, but are in our major responsibilities. As Black men, we have to do this. This is who we are. So, and the truth is, we wouldn't work here unless you did allow us that. So we're in that space. And those are the kind of words that get out. We were sitting at a national conference in Portland a couple months ago, and we had a big event for folks at my institution, and we invited other people, and they were just shocked. Wait a minute, you got all these brothers that work here? Yeah, we do. Well, how do I come and work there? Because if you have that many of us, we're saying, okay, it's okay to be here. Like you were saying with the gentleman that came around, it wasn't just being there, it was allowing him. I keep saying it's like having Adrian Peterson as a running back. You don't run spread. You let him line up way in the back and you just give him the ball, because that's what he does. So when we're there, you have to use our expertise and our experience, knowing that there's things in us that we do because we're called to do it. We do it because people did it for us. Leanne does it because I did it for her. I do it because people did it for me. That's just what we're going to do. And if we show up, we're going to show out in that way. And if you're not going to allow us to do that, first off, it's going to cost your, Tierney, what did they say, Bank of America? $23 trillion, a lack of diversity costs the American economy, right? So if we would just hire different, but then allow different to be different, right? Just like in any other situation, that's going to attract more. Doesn't matter where you work. Tierney, talk a little bit about because you talked a lot about your executive coaching work. Talk about the work that you do and the advice you can give to organizations as they're beginning a search process, right? As they're beginning to scaffold that success profile of candidates, building their search committee. How do they advertise vacancies? But then even more, how do they make sure that when different applies, they aren't just used to looking at people who've went to A to B to C to D? Because we have two women on here that didn't go from A to B to C to D. They didn't have that progression. They went from A to L to Z to T to Y. That's different too, right? And we're always looking at, well, why did they do all of that? Well, because that's how life works. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So for most organizations, and again, as a consultant and working with a lot of nonprofit and corporate organizations, let's start looking at the job description. How inclusive are the words? Have you put it through Texio, gender decoder, and different things like that to understand the words you're using trying to recruit before you put it out on Indeed or whatever platform that it is, as far as that's concerned, to make sure it uses inclusive language, one. Two, your recruiters. 9 times around, just being very transparent, recruiters in most spaces are white women. And so how we diversify our recruitment team is also so important as well. In making sure that you have somebody from a different background in that recruitment process to help you navigate that. That's either internally to your organization or externally to your organization when you bring in somebody to help you navigate that. Third, most of the times we go to the same well to recruit. Working in higher education, I know that there's organizations, I'm going to always go to UNC Chapel Hill, where I just came from, or I'm always going to go to the Ohio State University or the University of Minnesota, right? Well, there's these schools called HBCUs that a whole lot of people just found out about after George Floyd, but they've been around going on almost 200 years, some schools. There's HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions, and then you have MSIs, which my institution is close to being here at the University of South Carolina Upstate, where you're almost tipping at 50 to 51% of your student body being students of color. Yet, most organizations fall into what I call the Ivy League bureaucracy, meaning that a Leanne and Natasha, go Zips, Leanne, would not come to the University of Akron and try to recruit the great talent like me and Leanne, where we went to school at, but they'll go to Harvard, Yale, whatever it may be, with the name recognition. Talent is everywhere. There is not access for all talent, and that is the key. And so what we need to do is diversify our pools. I'll give you a prime example. A good fraternity brother of mine is hitting me up left and right. I need to hire engineers. I need to hire engineers. I'm like, well, I can give you all 16 HBCUs that have an engineering program. They just want to go to North Carolina A&T. Guess what? Everybody wants to go to North Carolina. It's number one producer of African-American engineers. Yet you got a school called Prairie View A&M, Tuskegee University, Texas Southern is on the brink of trying to create an engineering school. You've got Morgan State. I can go on and on. Yet I told him his company is doing a due diligence by just looking at one school. When there's multiple schools that have the talent they're looking for, not just in engineering, but other avenues as well to fill out their portfolio of recruitment. There's also the unique opportunity that you create MOUs and also create what I call a pipeline of recruitment. I never forget when I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, working at the University of Tennessee, DOE had a pipeline recruitment for reaching back to Alabama and A&M in certain schools that were on their radar that they knew every year they were hiring 3, 4, and 5. When I was at UNC Chapel Hill, P&G, guaranteed every year 25 students are going to work at Procter & Gamble. So again, how do you create those pipelines from your diversity lens as well? And then how do you have people on the back end who understand the needs of those students when you're recruiting? Because it's not about just recruiting, it's the retention. Gen Z wants to move up fast. They want to get paid. They want to have flexibility. Heck, I want to get paid and have flexibility too. So it's important for us all to understand that as we navigate this space, what is happening in the workforce? 60% of all jobs, and I think I heard Natasha says she has a daughter, I have a daughter as well, will be different in the next 20 years based upon what my daughter is. She's going into 2nd grade. And it's important for me to understand that, like 60% of jobs will look totally different. You'd have told me I could have been a social media influencer 20 years ago. Trust me, we would not be on this call right now. I will be down in the Bahamas taking all kinds of pictures, and you guys are paying me a whole bunch of money just to post pictures.
No, you're 100% right. I think the thing that is, I was doing a talk for our good friend Phyllis Nichols at the Urban League in Knoxville with one of their job training programs around job training and development. And we were talking about the jobs that will be gone in 10 years. And the kind of things blow your mind. Doctors. And that, like, what do you mean doctors? Like, we're always going to need doctors and lawyers. Well, no, a virtual world makes seeing a doctor really flexible. I can see Leanne in Atlanta tomorrow. I mean, and so doctors that are in a virtual space is really different from doctors in person. Same thing with lawyers, trying whole cases virtually. Delivery drivers, the person that drives UPS, Postal Service, all of those things. By 10 years from now, there's going to be nothing but cars that drive themselves. On campus at the University of Kentucky, we have robots that deliver food around campus.
Yeah.
Like literally robots. That's crazy to me. The craziest part isn't that robots are delivering food, it's that students are walking around them like robots aren't delivering food. Like we're the Jetsons, Natasha.
Yeah.
Remember the Jet? I'm like, what? This road. And it's just happening all over the place. And I think the key with Gen Z is you're saying, Tierney, I hear it with my engineering students from Akron. One of my students, Deborah, was talking about she was looking to do a transition. She was a biomedical engineer, had a couple companies recruiting her. One of the ones was in Orlando, Kissimmee area, and just kept talking about Disney World. And at some point, Deborah rolled her eyes and said, I'm an engineer. I can go to Disney World anytime I want. What are you going to do for me? And so she took a job literally in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, from a company that she thought was going to develop her and give her belonging and give her community and pour into her what I call robust professional development, right? That mindful coaching that's like, okay, no, Leanne, don't come see me when you have questions. Leanne, we're going to do this. Sit down, let me teach you that. That's what young people are looking for. Whether it leads to more money down the road or not, they see that as value. If you aren't pouring into me, then you don't care about me. Leanne, talk about, because Tierney opened up kind of this conversation about different. And I know one of the pieces you and I walk through is just the challenge as an amazing, first, not only a single mom who was a student, but with an amazing GPA who struggled getting into med school, getting people to say, because Leanne's journey was different. Talk about how you now, as the person who hires, you as the person who now markets yourself and all these places, right? Talk about how different, not only experiences, but different thoughts, how you pour into those things and encourage it, because then that, I think, attracts different more too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I always say, when I'm in a room, I'm very multidisciplinary and collaborative when I work. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, I want all the shine on me. I'm only like, my views are limited, right? So I love to be in a room with people, different races, ages, genders. That's how you're going to have the best outcome. And I promise you, when I sit in those rooms and have those discussions, that's when I get the grant money, is when because you're hitting all different thought processes when you're applying for funding and things like that. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I would say it's interesting now looking back, since I started back to school at a later age and completed training and have been working since then, the things that were setbacks at the time now are the things that people will highlight, right? So, you know that when I graduated with my bachelor's, I was having trouble getting into medical schools. And so I didn't have the best MCAT score, but my GPA was excellent. And but you knew the background of, oh, she was a single mom at the time. Um, you know, I called myself a Section 8 princess at that time. You know, I've gone from one end to the other, but at that time, that's how it was. And so I was just trying to maintain working full time, going to school full time, all of that. And so I didn't have the funds to pay for an MCAT training course. It was just all my money to take the test, right? And then when I took the test, I had the flu when I took the test. And so I didn't do well, but I couldn't retake the test because that was my money for that test the one time. So people don't know that though when they're looking at your score. But I remember as I transitioned that you would tell different, you know, organizations and institutions, like, you have to look past this MCAT score. Like, she's able to have this GPA in the midst of a lot of different things going on in her life. And so some institutions listened, some didn't, right? And then it came to play that when I went to get my doctoral degree, now here I was a few years into that, and I got stage 4 cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I got through that, thank God, graduated the same amount of time as everybody else in my class, and with the record at that institution of the most publications from a student, being a first author. And so those things that you kind of had told people about, like, listen, she's had these things happen, but she can overcome it and still be successful. It was like, now it came into play again. And so then when I'm at institutions that I work at now, and they know the backstory, and then they'll say, oh, wow, you know, can you help us with this, or can you help us raise money for that, or can you talk to these fundraisers, or can you talk to these students, or whatever. It's all these things that were difficult at the time that were kind of like, we don't know. She seems like she's got a lot going on and distractions, and this test score wasn't that great. To now, in hindsight, it's like, oh, well, she can do well and juggle all of these things. Well, I think they should listen to you in the first place. But, you know, life has, there's a reason for everything. So it worked out, right? But
well, and that's, you know, all things work for the good, right? But it could have worked for the good for the state of Ohio, because I was shaking trees. I mean, losing my mind. I won't mention the deans of graduate school, med school admission, who I said, just give her an interview. Oh no, again, she doesn't fit that MCAT score. Well, okay, but you say you want people who can handle adversity and who are committed to community. Leanne didn't mention she started doing undergraduate research with the foremost prostate cancer researcher on the planet at Cleveland Clinic when she was an undergrad, right? So that story, we have to start looking at people differently too. That's the challenge. When we try to hire, we're looking for us. The advantage Leanne and Natasha and Tierney and I have, and all us have, is when we sit on those search committees, we start asking the right questions. Well, we just hired a new assistant dean in one of our colleges. And I shouldn't have had to work that hard to hire the most qualified person, because I had to work really hard politically to get that done. And the brother's bad. I mean, it wasn't even close. We had some really great finalists, but when you have to do that much, Tierney, you've seen it, that much political work to get people to just, what are we talking about here? This is
Adam,
the most qualified. Go ahead, bro.
Adam, I was going to tell you, a lot of times from interview process, we hire mediocrity, honestly. Because it's a simple fact, you know, like I said, when you're dealing with a homogenous culture, people don't understand what is great, right? Somebody can do one thing and say, oh, that's the best thing since sliced bread, yet that's average somewhere else, right? So you got to understand, what are you getting and what are you looking for when you have these conversations? How are you diversifying the pool? Because that's another thing organizations don't do. They post jobs in the same location. Yet there's the Urban League, the NAACP, Divine Nine fraternities, you name it, across the board. Whenever a company calls me and wants to use my organization to recruit, I tell them automatically, where are you recruiting at? Why aren't you getting the diverse candidates that you've talked about overall? And they don't have that. Why? Because again, the recruiters are homogenous, and so they don't know about all these different other groups. If you're a good recruiter, especially if you're involved with SHRM and all that stuff, you're all over the place. You're learning where all the bodies are buried, as I like to say, and what's going on to be able to recruit. You know, if I need somebody in healthcare, if I need somebody in nonprofit, you're in all those spaces to kind of understand that. And there's a lot of people like Leanne and Natasha that are rock stars. One of the things we have to realize is how big relationships are. There's two types of currencies you get in life. You get a performance currency. How well you perform in your job or what you do is what Leanne and Natasha, yourself, Adam, are known for. Your second currency is relationship. 80% of all jobs come from relationships. So it's important to understand, how do you build out as a recruiter, as a person sitting there to help diversify that pool. And another thing that I challenge my colleagues that don't look like me a lot of times is, where's your true network that is not everyone that looks like you?
Yeah, it's really good. Sorry, we had lightning. So I'm just making sure we're still here. It's been crazy in Kentucky. It feels like Florida. It just pours in the middle of the afternoon.
That's that bluegrass. That's that bluegrass.
Oh, it's a bluegrass. It's a bluegrass. I think Tierney's spot on, y'all. I think the challenges is that understanding people of color, LGBTQ folks, we move differently. And we're going to tell each other, hey, you can go work there. Hey, that's okay. So the question is, how are you treating the people who are different that work for you? Because if they're looking, they're complaining to their Greek brothers and sisters. They're complaining to their sorority or fraternity. They're talking about how you're not. I was working at an organization the day that the Derek Chauvin trial came on, or the day that the verdict was supposed to happen. And we're all on Zoom, and all the people of color in unification, not even talking about, have our cameras off. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The trial's getting ready to come down. We as brown people should not be worried when everybody saw this dude murder our brother in the middle of the street. Okay, but we're worried, and it's bringing up all this trauma. And we're sitting in this literally, basically Dean's meeting. Why are we talking about this right now, right? But if you're a person of color and you're in that space, do you feel seen? Do you feel valued? If essentially what we're saying on Zoom is, if you don't see me, you ain't gonna see me. And we just keep the camera off. There's more important things going on right now than what we're talking about in a meeting, right? I mean, folks over here are afraid that they're gonna die, and we're seeing if the trial, and you are so unaware. So as employees, those are your best brand ambassadors, as Natasha pointed out, right? Where the guy who talked to you was the reason why you went to Mortensen. Natasha, talk a little bit about some of your work, because I know that you do work for your job, but then you're also a representative of not just your job, but moms and people of color, and you're working in the St. Paul Mayor's Task Force, and you're doing all these things. That's really your work. What has drawn you to that, and how has your company provided you space to do those things? Because your company could say, no, you can't, in the old days, you can't moonlight. You can't do those things. You can't do this, what we're doing today. But I know the company that you work for, and they would be gassing you up. They would be saying, I'm excited that you're doing those things. So talk about how your company has embraced you and other people being their full selves outside of work, which oftentimes people are nervous about and afraid about.
Sure. So they allow us flexibility, like you see me sitting in the house right now. But sometimes I go into the office. I would say, like, what they do is they keep track of how many volunteering hours people are putting in. What basically they would consider it as volunteering. Like when I help my daughter with the Mandarin immersion program at school, I'm a parent, a classroom parent. So when I have activities like that, when I talk with the Anti-Racism Coalition to help other people learn about diversity, they assist with that for the most part. But they just allow me the flexibility to be who I am, because they believe that if I feel like I'm making a difference in society, I'll be able to come back to work and be productive.
And how does that entrench you? How does that water your roots deep and wide at your company? How does that say to you, okay, this is a place I want to be. This is a place that values me. And then if there were other jobs there that were posted, would you tell other people of color to apply?
So I'll be honest, like I've been with Mortensen for not a very long period of time, but they have been allowing me to do those things that I discussed. At this point, like I said before, they do put a lot of resources into webinars similar to this. That I've attended like 2 of them so far that they have on a monthly basis. But we also go as far as to our particular department does a diversity and inclusion discussion. And it's interesting to see because it's not a whole lot of people of color, a lot of people who some people would consider different, but it makes me want to kind of touch on the word diversity, equity, and inclusion really quick. So some people, like some of the people who I work with come from a background of privilege and they went to like Ivy League schools and things like that. Like I'm a risk analyst, I'm looking at data and we make big decisions to help people keep when we build something, keep everybody safe there. So and my job is to like, I could deny people certain opportunities or grant them, basically is what I do all day, or basically give recommendation or data like, hey, we shouldn't work with these people. But so the thing about it is I'm one of the only people of color in that department. And so some people think that the diversity and inclusion meetings that we have are a waste of time, or we got so much work to do, they don't really want to listen to it. And also some people feel like when we sit up and talk about being different, they feel excluded at that point. Some people who look like the majority are like, well, what about us? Like, if we continue to open up the doors for diversity, or if we're running on this diversity kick, what will happen to us? So I'm glad that I'm here at this company because it gives, I'm an outspoken individual. You know me, you know, people hire me to do speeches about a lot of real crazy topics, and I'm able to bring harmony. Like, you know what I mean? Like things that a lot of people wouldn't be able to sit down and discuss without fighting with each other. I have that positive energy and able to bring everybody together to collaborate. So I explained that to them this morning in a meeting that I'm going to be talking with you all, and that he's like, what about that? What's the point? Like, you know, they don't understand the disparities that we experience. And I think that people don't know, like I told you, I do a incredible amount of research about our Black history and how the things that happened to us in the past economically impacted us now. So a lot of people just think only about slavery for some reason, and not understanding that there were Black cities that had hospitals and airports and stuff like that after slavery. And so, but with desegregation, the Federal Highway Act, and a whole lot of other laws that were passed, they dismantled those communities and kind of spread out people like Leanne and you and Tierney around so that you guys are wealthy, but you may not live in like a full community where people like you are around. So I just kind of explained that to them. Like the reason why Mortensen is so dedicated to diversity is because they as a company understand how laws and stuff that were in place kind of impacted us. And so they're trying to put a fix on that by being like, hey, we welcome you to be here. We want you here and we want to fix that. So I would say like that's one good thing about the company that I definitely got to salute them about.
Now,
To Natasha's point, there's 2 books everybody should read. The Color of Money by Mashara Banks. It truly breaks down the banking industry of why African Americans, particularly in communities of color, are not where they need to be economically. Because to her point, we always talk about Tulsa, but there was other Tulsas or other Wall Streets across the country, historically Durham, North Carolina, where I live, Wilmington, North Carolina, multiple different places that were destroyed based upon jealousy. Let's just be honest. 2, the next book should be called The Color of Law, because our great government also played a great role in the blockage of people of color, particularly African Americans, being able to have a quality of life that everyone talks about. And so when Natasha shows up to work and they say, why are we talking about this? Why are we addressing this? Because you have a privilege that you don't realize that my ancestors didn't have because they were always put in a certain box or category. A Black doctor couldn't practice because of the University of Louisville medical doctor said that there shouldn't be as many Black medical schools that existed, as Natasha's already pointed out. So again, there's these historical contexts when you're going out to recruit, when you're looking internally to your organization, when we talk about all these great organizations, the HR blocks, you know what I'm saying? All these organizations that have been created after World War II based upon the GI Bill that my grandfather did never have the opportunity to do.
that's right.
All he could do is go be a janitor at a middle school or a high school. Yet I am my ancestors' wildest dream. I sit here with 4 degrees. So it's important for us to understand that as we navigate that is when I go into a room that Natasha's dealing with, I have to point out the historical context. And then I also have to educate them that you have an ethnic identity that you probably don't even know about yourself.
Well, I think, Tierney, really good points. Linda Smith is probably watching this right now. She's reading The Color of Law and The Color of Money right now. So I'm sure she's gassing you up and snapping. Because I was telling a friend of mine, if land ownership didn't build wealth and education weren't valuable things, why did they have to create multiple laws multiple times to give them to Black and brown people? People knew what the power of owning land is and was, and they know what the power of education is. That's how you build wealth in this country, those two things, right? And you wouldn't, if you would have followed the 13th, 14th Amendment, we wouldn't have needed a Civil Rights Act or a Voting Rights Act. We still wouldn't be fighting both. It was 100 years between those things. So those are just the realities. And even if you get to, in the work we do, Tierney, Leanne, working in higher ed, when I'm sitting there reading Bank of America's diversity, a lack of diversity is costing 23 trillion, whatever that meant. I'm thinking about the University of North Carolina, which as a public higher ed institution, them, Virginia, Michigan, really are the three who kind of act like
Public Ivies. Public
right?
Ivies.
And even places who are flagship land grants where I work, the Show in Kentucky, right? We aspire to be North Carolina and Michigan, but or Virginia. None of them still are an A school. None of them have 90% graduation rates, right? What happened in our industry if we just hired the most qualified? We didn't use fit. We didn't use I like. We didn't use all of these things. If we just hired the best coaches on the field to work with our students, Leanne, same thing in the medical industry, same thing. You imagine construction companies hiring the least qualified engineers, the least qualified people, but we do it all the time. And the price to our country financially, but also the price to everything else. It's the pieces, Tierney, that you're talking about that are so key. The things that people label CRT, which is basically just American history. You have to know those things so you can unpack them, so you can help deal with some of the systems that are impeding. Well, why aren't anybody applying? Well, people aren't applying because there are disadvantages that you aren't helping deal with. Leanne, I was asking somebody when we were at Akron one day, I said, it was my mom, by the way. She said, Adam, your staff is always predominantly people of color everywhere you work. And I said, yeah, we work with all students though. Akron, Bama, Kentucky, anywhere I've been, it's always. And she said, well, do you purposely hire Black and brown folks? I purposely make it equitable. Then the people who have climbed over glass and walls and buried, Leanne Wood Burnham would always have a job working for me. Natasha, you would, because it's just, look, who is actually the strongest, fastest, committed to this work, has the right heart? Well, it's easier. But one of the things that, Leanne, that you brought up that I wanted all y'all to touch on, but Leanne, you and Natasha first, is that people of color, employees of color are beginning to realize, and if you put yourself in that because you've just transitioned to a new place, that we are the prize. Right? There was an old school mind, Tierney, us Gen Xers, we a whole different thing. We're running institutions now and you're lucky to work here. No, bro, you lucky to have me. Okay, I can go anywhere I want. And so how is that culture shift happening, right? And how do people of color that work at the institution embrace that, and as people are looking for job opportunities and looking to attract people, understand you are more lucky to have Natasha. Mortensen is more lucky. I tell Mortensen, you more lucky to have my student Natasha Jones, okay, than Natasha is to be at Mortensen, period. Okay, it's just that simple. How do you get that into a corporate culture that's very much turned on its head in that way?
I had to deal with this in the past few years. And first thing is you put it in writing. So I was trying to hire underrepresented minority rock star Black woman. And she had every skill sets there, personality there, publications there, references there, all of this. And I said, I want to hire her at this rate. And it shouldn't be a problem because in academia, how it works, if you have grants, which I have a few grants, my grant money pays who I'm hiring. So if I say I want to pay this person this rate, it really shouldn't even, that should just be it. And so this particular institution came back and said, well, we don't hire at that rate for somebody that just graduated. And I said, well, you do, because I was hired in at that rate because my boss, who was a Black man who was, in charge at that time, saw talent in me and hired me in at that rate. So yeah, if I see a rock star and I want to hire that person at that rate, it can be at that rate. And so I received more pushback. You have to justify why this person needs to be hired in at this rate. So to me, I was like, you have the CV, like you already see why she should be hired in at this rate. But anyways, I wrote, I have my PhD, so I've written a dissertation before. When I tell you this email was like a whole like dissertation, it was so long of exactly what you're just saying. I said, this institution speaks about wanting to diversify and hire top talent. You consider me to be that. I've recruited this person. I'm telling you, this person is a rock star. You can see on paper that she's a rock star. And to be quite honest, she's the prize, not here. So she can go anywhere. And so I don't want to lose her because you want to argue with me about me paying her what she's worth. She's worth that. So she can go anywhere else. And so you just need to make it happen. And the way that I put it in writing and copied everybody that needed to be copied and a few more, they just said, oh, that's all we needed. Okay, we'll go ahead and hire her at that. But it really stuck up.
That's sad. That's sad, Leanne, because Olivia Pope's dad already told us that we got to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Right.
And you're recruiting someone that the institutions already said, we want diversity, we want X, Y, and Z, yet you're getting pushed back over probably a couple $1,000s at that, right?
Yes. Which means nothing to my grant. It means nothing to the institution, but for somebody who's just graduated, that gap means a lot. And they don't understand that gap. When you hire somebody in and they are top talent, they're underrepresented minority, and you're showing them their work, they're going to perform better. They are going to feel appreciated. That's how it's been in my experience. I'm going to show up to work every day excited, knowing that I'm at that level, than just thinking I'm entry level if my credentials weren't necessarily entry level coming in.
Well, and I think, Leanne, what you're saying, if I can just throw this in, the thing that I'm proud of is that my students are not just foot washers, we're table tippers.
Exactly.
Okay? Natasha Jones, you better tip some tables in Twin Cities. Leanne, you know what you're supposed to do. Okay, what they gonna do to us? I mean, ain't nobody lynching anybody. What? We all got good jobs, nice houses. I mean, it's none of us. Leanne, you and I have been together almost the majority of your life. There's no way we could have imagined these lives. So what do we have to lose, y'all? If somebody didn't, if you've ever stood on Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and looked down and picture in your mind Bull Connor and people who are elected and supported by the government and all the things coming at young people and old people coming out of church dressed in their Sunday best, and we can't tip a few tables and wash some feet? Come on now, what y'all gonna do? You're not gonna do to me what you did to them. So if we have to use tools of, okay, let me document. Now, the part that Tierney brought up that I will reject, not that Tierney said it, but we have to work twice as hard to get, F that. Okay, that's white supremacy. That's anti-Black. I ain't working twice as hard. I'm gonna work just as hard. I'm gonna be successful, and you're gonna reward me for my ability, or I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. And that's what Gen Z is doing. Gen Z is rejecting that ideology, because what that's saying is to people who aren't as successful with stuff that come from certain environments, is that you just weren't willing to work as hard as I was. No, we're all fighting white supremacy, patriarchy, and colonialism, period. And I just got lucky. God just blessed me with some grace that I had this and have been successful. Natasha, talk a little bit about your experiences, about how do you mentor people and talk about how valuable they are to the company. So when you're going to interview, what I always tell young professionals is you're interviewing them. Before Tierney decided he was going to Upstate, he vetted them, okay? It was more about him vetting them than them vetting him. He was deciding, is this a place I'm willing to risk moving my family, all the things. So talk about how you empower young people to do that, because I think that's really important in the reverse, because folks on here hiring don't know that people coming to an interview are actually interviewing the employer, especially people of color.
Right. So I would say I do that by being an example. I'm actually from an impoverished community called Gary, Indiana. And it used to be like a civil rights hub. A lot of people don't know that. Like I was when I went to school, a lot of my teachers were African American, the doctors and everybody was. And when I moved here, that's when I learned about diversity. And so a lot of the people who follow me are not just people who look like me, because I really wholeheartedly believe in diversity. And I'm willing to, my whole job, like, because I'm with the, anti-racism. I don't want, this might sound, crazy, but I wouldn't want to switch it up and to where we are reflecting back that same energy that have been bestowed upon us for like 400 years. No, that sounds different, but I wouldn't want that. I would want more collaboration, equality, and inclusion and things like that. And so the people that I mentor and talk to about those hard conversations, I bring that up to them. All I want for us to do is have common ground. Sometimes you have to share like your story in the interview. People ask me, to cut the what's the word I'm looking for? Just to cut the ice or whatever. They'll ask you like, where are you from? And that gives me the opportunity to give them this story about where am I from, and then they can look at my resume like, whoa, like you went through all of that. You saw like drive-bys or what have you, different things. You experienced all the disparity, but you didn't let any of that stop you from being successful. So that's basically how I do it. I kind of tap my foot into the water. I don't dive all the way in, and I kind of see if I'm talking to somebody who's willing to be accepting, or at least try to open up their eyes to my point of view. You know what I mean? Like, I'm bold, you got to be bold, but there's a way about it, because you don't want to get sued or have a poor reputation or anything like that. So the way I mentor is, by being an example and basically helping that, make sure that I create an environment, foster an environment where everybody feels like they can share so that we can learn from each other.
When I think one of the pieces, Tierney, and I'm going to turn this to you, one of the things that I'll leave to all the colleagues that are doing hiring, that are working at institutions or working for companies, you need to recruit hard, okay? Two of these young women on here, Tierney and I are old guys, right? These young people, okay, this is like recruiting LeBron James to come play for your team, right? When I recruit, where I work full time, and I bring people to the University of Kentucky, it's a big deal in our work to come to a campus like Kentucky or to come to North Carolina. I want them to come and go out to dinner. I want people to spend time with them. I want to give them a big blue gift bag at the hotel right next to Rupp Arena, because that's a big deal, right? Even if you don't get the job, we also need to treat people in a way that is mindful. When you say the deadline for, hey, we should have decisions by the middle of next week, if that deadline has come and gone, you shoot people an email and you say, hey, just providing you a little update. We've been a little later than we thought, blah, 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 blah. When you don't hire finalists, you pick up the phone and you call them, okay? Or you send them an email. And you say, you don't wait for your company's HR system. Tierney, we know this in higher ed. You get an email saying you weren't selected and you didn't apply for that job 6 months ago, right? You tell people, hey, Natasha, I just wanted to reach out to you and tell you we decided to go in a different direction, but I really appreciate your time. Just know how much I appreciate you taking the time to apply. We don't take that lightly. I wish you the very best. If you need anything from me, don't hesitate to reach out. People feel, again, you feeling awkward, you shouldn't feel awkward doing it, because that's what we would want. Just tell me you went into different, because then what happens, when I worked at Alabama, people would leave that I didn't hire. They would come on campus and it's roll tides. It was a big deal. So you want to make it an experience for people. And when because you can't hire everybody, you want them to leave and tell their friends. Now, I'm a crew, and what Tierney has, and what I think I've built, is that Tierney Bates, that Adam Smith, I don't care where they work, they doing it all right. And when you build that reputation as an organization and as a person, then you're the kind of recruiter. People won't apply to the institution, they'll apply to Tierney Bates. They'll say, okay, is this a part of Tierney's team? All right, I'm all good. That's when you build it. But a lot of that is doing some of that hard personal work in the recruiting process, making it feel like they're a 5-star recruit. Leanne, you know what you're talking about, rock star. Okay, you come to Kentucky, I was recruiting, my number one guy for nursing had an offer at Florida State on the table. Okay, I didn't want him to come to town. He's more valuable to me. I need to keep him in Big Blue Nation. That's what we're trying to do. That's a very different cultural organizational strategy than what higher ed or even the corporate world applied before. But more importantly, that's what Gen Z wants, and that's what people of color want. And the word will get out. Okay, you apply there and they treated you right. Hey, Natasha, they called you. I felt bad that I didn't get the gig, but you know, a dude called me and I really appreciate that because I didn't want to think about it another weekend, right? Tierney, talk about some of your processes around that, some of the things that you've seen because you've been around, some of the things that you've seen that are troublesome, and how you've used some of those troublesome things to not only advise other people, but to implement in your own hiring practices and recruiting practices.
I'm gonna get on you, Adam. I might have been around, but I ain't no OG like that.
You old, bro. Oh, compared to these young men.
I'm still a spring chicken. Some of the things we got to think about is that higher education needs to adapt corporate recruitment processes and vice versa. Corporate entities need to adapt some of the higher education practices when it comes to prime example, you just mentioned it. Time to let people know where they're at in the candidates pool. We paid attention the last 2 years. Everybody's been arguing. I can't find staff. I can't find. Why that is people realize they can make more money other ways. I can go Uber. I can start content. Like I said, I can be a social media influencer right now and retire. So it's all these different things that are going on in our society. And then also we had to realize that 4 million people retired after the pandemic. We realized that a lot of people stopped because moms had to decide, do I go to work or do I stay home because I got multiple kids during this pandemic. So we lost 2 million women in the workforce. So all these idiosyncrasies happen. And so we need to switch up how we're recruiting, how we're doing certain things. And when I say corporate needs to adapt higher ed and higher ed needs to adapt corporate, at least in the corporate world, you would know where you stand usually in the process. Some communication is going on. Yes, we like you. Yes, we don't like you. Higher education, like you said before, it can be 6 months, a year. I remember one time getting something after a year applying to a job. It's horrible. It's horrible. And we need to decrease that. Good thing when I was at the University of North Carolina, we had 45 days to hire. That's something we adopted from a corporate entity standpoint to say 45 days. From the time you post a job to the time you offer, you got 45 days. We need to do more of that. We need to also realize how we're recruiting, where we're recruiting. Again, you just mentioned it. We go out and recruit from athletics, working at big schools like Tennessee, Louisville, and Chapel Hill. We'll go out and spend millions of dollars. I remember it was like a $3 million recruiting budget when I was at Tennessee on recruiting. Yet, when it comes to recruiting for our talent at higher education institutions, nonprofits or companies and corporations, we don't spend any money. You know what I'm saying? Corporates usually do sometimes, but not on the higher education side. We don't even say, we're not offering sign-on bonuses. You want to get talent right now? Offer a sign-on bonus. We can do it in higher education if we wanted to. We can really legislate it and we can push it through as far as concerned. Trust me, if you was to call me and say, hey, Natasha, I got a job for you. I'm gonna give you a $7,000 sign-on bonus. She'd be like, well, I'm listening. You know what I'm saying? Here's the salary, all the other great stuff. So it's important to understand that we have to change our practices. Schools are talking about sign-on bonuses, right? We're talking about flexible work time. We have to implement it in higher education. If we don't, we're always going to be bleeding staff, and the next generation, Generation Z, won't want to come work in higher education because we're not offering these things, and they can go work in ed tech, not ed profit, all this other great stuff to be able to make money and live a flexible work style. Overall, we also have to understand where we're recruiting, how we're recruiting, our practices internally, how we make an offer. Let's make the best offer. I have a budget line. If I can pay somebody $90,000 a year, to Leanne's point, let me pay the person $90,000 a year. Let's get over these humps that we need to be able to do because it's in my budget line to be able to move forward and everything like that. And then What are we doing for professional development to help people move along and continue? I don't expect my staff to come and stay with me for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but I'm going to make sure that you're in the Tierney Bates coaching tree. Because when I came to USC Upstate, about 50 phone calls went off that week and was like, I want to come work for you. Let me know what you got. You got a job. I'm coming to work for you. I know how good you are, blah, blah, blah. Again, I want people to come out underneath me and go on and do great things where I can call them up one day and say, hey, I just need a little part-time job. Just help me out there. I'm going towards retirement, all the other great stuff. Or, hey, I left. I need a new job. Can you help me out? Like I said, 80% of all jobs come from relationships. So how are you making sure you're developing your team? When you bring on new recruits, how are you onboarding? Most employees will leave after the first 90 days or start looking if you don't onboard them right as well. Do you make them feel like they belong? Do they feel like their voices can be heard? Can they speak up? All these other factors play a huge role. Problem is, you got to teach everybody in your organization this. It can't just be the hiring manager. It just can't be the HR person. It has to be your whole organization and creating a culture of care within your organization as far as that's concerned to get everybody on the table. Now, if people want to reach out to me, I'm just going to do a quick plug. We have developed an anti-racism diversity scorecard around recruitment to help you navigate the recruitment process and understand and take a snapshot of your picture of your organization to be able to understand where you are and where you want to go. And it works best basically across any industry. We focus it on corporate, but it works in higher education and across the board.
Love it. One of the books that is been singing to me lately is Radical Candor. Radical Candor. I call it disruptive coaching. One of the biggest challenges in the work that we do is that sometimes there's that passive aggressive, you don't tell anybody anything and then you heap it on them all at once, or you're just aggressive, but there's no real coaching, no sitting down. And one of the things that all of us are willing to do with any y'all, because one of the challenges with professional development and webinars, it's a one-off. We always need an accountability partner to sit down with us and say, wait a minute, how is my process looking? So like Tierney's talking about with the scorecard, Leanne and Natasha, myself, we're always willing to sit down with you and be that outside voice and that other set of eyes to say, oh, you're missing it here. Oh, here's an opportunity. Oh, why are you doing it this way? Those are conversations that sometimes one of the challenges we all have in higher education is it's that straight up Great Commission, right? Sometimes you have to dust yourself off and leave because in the end, we're not accepted. And Tierney is a consultant until he works where he works. And then they're like, you don't know anything, Bates. But then people are paying you to come tell you what to do. It's one of those challenges. And so we're always available to have those conversations with y'all. I'm going to ask Lisa to reshare people's contact information if folks have any additional questions. Leanne, Natasha, I want to kind of let y'all wrap it up. What are the top things? So this isn't just about attracting different, right? This is about making the places you are a place that you would tell people to go. So talk real quickly about how a place, an organization, how individuals who you work with can make the culture one that makes space for you, and thus in turn you're saying to friends, Tierney's saying to all his branches and roots, hey, come work here. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, well, I mean, I've worked at places where I've had exit interviews and I've let them know I will never refer someone here, just so you know. When it comes time for my son to go to school, it's not going to be here. So I've had that in exit interviews, and then I've had situations where I just am just always glowing about how great a place is. To me, the difference is basically how much you are valued in terms of your opinion. And so I've sat in on places where I don't feel my opinion matters, and they'll say, oh, Leanne, we're trying to plan such and such in a minority community. And then I'll say, oh, perfect, this is my lane. You got to watch how you say this. You should reconsider how you're doing this. And then it'll be sort of, I'll be met with, that's nice, that's cute, and disregard it, right? And then I've worked at other places where anything that I'm saying, they're sitting there with a notepad saying, oh my God, we got to do this. We got to do this. And then they see that it's successful. So I would say seeing how much your opinion is valued. And then that also comes into the recruitment process. A lot of times people will ask me, how do you recruit the talent that you do? And I say, well, it's word of mouth. And then when you get people there, you just care for them while they are there. But the part that I don't understand sometimes is when people ask that question and then they don't take into account somebody that I would suggest for them. For example, I've worked at places where there's a push, we want to hire top talent, diverse recruits, and then I will give ad nauseum, here's a reference for that position you're looking for. Oh, you want somebody for that position? This person will be great. And it's kind of pushed under the rug. So there's a disconnect sometimes when it's, you really hire and retain great people, and then I'm handing you an olive branch for you to be able to hire other places, and then that's not taken into account. That's just like a no-brainer that I haven't figured out yet why certain institutions do that, but I have definitely noticed that. So I would say, yeah, places where your opinion is valued is the key for me.
Well, I think one of the keys, and Natasha, I'll give you this question too, is some of the things that we've piloted. Tierney's talking about flexible work. One of the things we're working on this year is providing employees additional pilot wellness things. So can we give folks, food costs a lot of money. Eating lunch on campus or eating lunch every day costs a lot of money. So can we give people meal swipes? Can we give them access to wellness facilities? Can we give them gym memberships? Can we provide folks opportunities to not have to take leave if it's under a certain number of hours, that they have some flexibility there? Can we give folks, Tierney, this is a big one, right? It's EAP. It used to be you call EAP, you get somebody right away if you're going through something. Right now it's challenging. And so one of the things that we've stood up is for our whole campus, students included, is virtual therapy, right? Can we give that to our team members, which is probably the most valuable thing, where you get 2, 3, 4 hours a month potentially of individual one-on-one counseling and therapy, knowing that people are they're living their lives, right? Every single day. And how do we help people mind that? Natasha, we'll let you take us out. Talk a little bit about that, right? But one of the challenges is being a person of color, as Leanne's talking about. We also don't want to be the DE&I person and the racial justice. We kind of just want to do our jobs too. It isn't our job to do the work for the company or the organization, right? We want to be able to do it. We want to be able to give our opinions and our thoughts, but we don't want to be that performative diversity hire, right? That is only tapped to do things in the community when we're doing a school supply drive, right? So talk a little bit about how companies and organizations can balance letting us live our best lives and be who we are and give our feedback, but while not shackling us with the entire anti-racism mission of the company and organization.
Right. I think that companies or people at the company, especially higher leadership, management, people responsible for training, could just treat other people, diversity hires or not, like how they would like to be treated at the end of the day. If they want themselves to be able to contribute to whatever society that they organization that they feel is important, they should give other people that opportunity to do the same thing. Like I said before, it helps you to be more productive. It makes you feel like the company cares about what you care about, and that's going to help you put more effort into making them successful. And so I would say that they should, if everyone would treat each other the way that they want other people to treat them, life would be, a roller coaster. Well, not, whatever's good to you, ice cream, whatever you like. But but yeah, at this point, when people hire you and you are like the first person to break barriers down and things like that, some people do assume that the only reason why you're there is because of your complexion or your accent or your what's the word, sexuality or whatever it may be, instead of recognizing that you were qualified for this role. You have the top talents and skills necessary. Sometimes it makes me sad a little bit that we have to focus so much on diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's just making like a big sign on my forehead that's like, you know, Black, like as soon as I walk in, instead of seeing me as a woman with talent, that's financial, with strong financial acumen, who can, you know, help you mitigate risk at your company. So, you know what I mean? So that's where I feel like if companies would just make it, you know, when they're hiring people, it shouldn't just be based on, to me, your race or whatever anyways, to begin with. No matter if we're talking about the majority white people or we're talking about if you're hiring diversity, you should be looking for the person that brings that skill. And you maybe even put a blindfold on so you're not paying too much attention to those attributes, the physical attributes of a person. So if people would do that, just those little couple things, that would make a company be able to retain the people that they want. And I would add to that about really quick about recruitment is key. Like I went to a state university. If they had an alliance with a state university, those people, not everybody who went there is a person of color, but they came from a whole lot of different backgrounds and experienced a whole lot of different life experiences that they could bring to the table to make a company better. So it's just about like, where are you going to seek out the people? And then once they get there, how do you treat them? When they show up, are you saying, hey, Black child? Or are you like, Natasha, yeah, I like the work that you did on that last report. So those are the things that will make somebody stay. Like I said before, I've been able to get hired. That's not the problem. But what I've been facing lately is how do they treat me once I get there? And I think it's interesting that even though like with society, we went through so much obstacles in order to get to where we are because of the laws that were set in place for our ancestors. My grandmother, that's not even that long ago, my great grandmother, what they went through. I think it's interesting that diversity is, we do a lot of diversity training on that way, but that nobody teaches me like how do you behave when you're in an environment where you're the only one of yourself? How do you do? So it would be, you know what I mean? Like maybe they should bring that up in the discussion. But overall, if companies would do things like that, I think it would be pretty easy to attract and retain the necessary diversity that they need for the workforce.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces, and I changed my mind, Tierney, I'm gonna let you close it out because you always have something enlightening to leave the people with. I think one of the biggest challenges I always hear in my, I don't know how many years now, career, 25-ish, is fair. Well, we gotta be fair, Adam. Please don't tell me about, you telling me about fair? I mean, let's not hear fair. What we need to provide is justice. What we need to provide is equity. What we need to provide are opportunities for people, because stop living in fair. Because the truth is, fair is treating everybody as individuals, not the same, because everyone isn't the same. Then we stop having street cutouts and stop having Braille on elevators. We just say, find your way, right? That would be fair. When it really is about looking at your active role as a human, your active role in your work. We all have sat on hiring committees. Are you going to be, the last piece I'll leave you with, don't let the people of color, the one, let's pick on Natasha. Natasha's on the hiring committee and she's the only Black person. And then there's another Black person who we're interviewing. Don't let it have to be Natasha to carry that water. That's hard, because I got to work with y'all, right? Let that be the white person there. Let that be the Black man. Let that be the Asian person. Let that be the ally or accomplice that says, no, I want this person. Because that's really hard when you're the only one, Natasha, and then you sit on a search committee, and then you are the one advocating for the other brown person, and I got to work with these people. And in their minds, they're thinking, it takes someone who's a little crazy like me to say, well, if you're thinking that about me, why are you advocating for the white person? That's a little different, right? So, but for others, those are the kind of things we can all do on searches. We can all sit there and say, well, what about this? Don't wait for your Black colleague or your Asian colleague or your LGBTQ colleague to be the one that has to carry that water. The woman who's on the search committee who has to carry the water for the one woman engineer who came in the door. Wait for her to advocate. That's hard. That's what accompliceship looks like, is you be the one saying that to support them, because it's going to retain them and give them space, right? And at the same time, it's going to attract the right people. Tierney, bring us home, bro.
So to kind of wrap us up, it's simple what you just meant. I don't need any more actors. I don't need any more allies. I need accomplices. I need somebody to go help me bury the body. It's important to understand we need you to be in the throes of that. And it boils down to three things: education, experience, and exposure. Educate yourself, like Natasha's mentioned about reading, understanding historical context and the things that have gone on specifically around recruitment and trying to get a diverse workforce. Expose yourself, take yourself outside of your comfort zone. The most smartest thing I ever did when I came out of college was go to attend a mosque, go attend a synagogue, go attend things that were of difference to me to learn more about others as far as that's concerned. So education, and then once you do the education and exposure, you'll have the experience to show up to be that accomplice that we're talking about, because now you can challenge the status quo. Now you can be engaged and you can help meet the needle between your organization, the recruitment process, and creating that culture of care that drives people wanting to work for your organization overall. You're leading then with a conscience of inclusion. And that is the ultimate goal I want everybody to learn today, is how do you end up leading with a conscience of inclusion as you take on work, as you work with your colleagues, and as you help develop your organization.
Tierney, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists today. Thank you all for joining us. It's always a pleasure to be in community with you. Look for the recording. Thank you so much to Infobase. Infobase is an amazing partner. They have been a partner of mine now for well over a year. They allow these conversations and communities to happen. They allow us to be thought leaders in these spaces, and not only to tell our truth, but to tell the truth, which is really vital to this work and these conversations. Y'all, thank you so much for your time today. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Peace.